peak performance. Hello everybody, and in this video I'm going to talk about how to get your performance up with simple steps, somewhat hard steps, and then hard steps that are like actually hard, that you actually have to do something to get. None of these will be super hard, like you don't have to download anything sketchy, you don't have to delete all your files in Windows, you don't have to do any of that. And that doesn't help much either, that's just like snake oil most of the time. Like in this video there will be not any snake oil. Most of these things give me a performance boost. I went all the way from 210 FPS all the way to my peak of 340. All these FPS tests were done on this workshop map. Talking about snake oil, there's a lot of snake oil in this sort of performance market. There's a lot of people telling like magical fixes. That really doesn't exist, but I can guarantee if you haven't done anything, you can probably get 20% more FPS on CS specifically, and maybe like 15 on other games. So first, we can start with the easiest of them all. I'm not going to talk about the super simple stuff like close the background apps and like close everything on your Windows you don't use and stuff like that. I'm not going to talk about simple stuff like that. But the simplest stuff I'm going to start at is the in-game settings. So the in-game settings you should use on CS specifically, and I will explain them one by one and what do they do. So first on the list you have boost player contrast. This just gives the models a little bit of a shadow. It reduces my FPS by about 1%, maybe less. I don't use it, I don't see an advantage as much. The second setting is Nvidia's low reflex, and you should have this enabled or plus boost. I would have it enabled if you have better than like a laptop PC, it gives better performance on average. So next we have anti-aliasing. You should have this at least on 2 if you're playing anything else than like native res. Even on native I would say to put this on 2 if you have a good graphics card. It doesn't reduce my FPS by a lot, and it gives a huge advantage to see better. And then shadow quality. Shadow quality you should have on low because of the new update, so you can actually see all shadows on low nowadays. Next, dynamic shadows, you should always have it on all, otherwise you don't see shadows from anything else than the sun. Next, model and texture detail. I saw 3 months ago that people were saying that if you put this on medium it gives more FPS, but on my PC it reduced my FPS by 25, which was huge. And next we have texture filtering. You should have this on 16x. It actually gives more FPS if the higher it is somehow. On other games it doesn't work like that. Shader detail and particle detail, low both. They just don't even look any different. I've tested it out, I can't even see a difference. Ambient occlusion, I personally have it disabled, even though I know it gives a competitive advantage on certain maps like Vertigo or Nuke. But I rather take the extra 10-5 FPS than take that advantage competitively. If you were playing LAN tournaments, I would say turn this on. If you have good PC, I would say to turn this on, but I'm squeezing as much frames as possible. And then the last two you should always have on quality unless you're running a complete and utter like potato. That's it for the in-game settings. That took like 2 minutes more than I thought it would. Then let's get on with the launch options. So the launch options, you should have the 2 most effective ones are just dash high and dash threads, and you should open your task manager and see how many cores you have. So it says threads, but what I have gathered from Reddit, it's actually talking about your cores. So you should have the amount of cores you see on your task manager, you should have the amount of cores plus 1. So let's say I have 6 cores. I should put 7. If you have 12 cores, you should put 13. Really simple. That's it for that one. And then let's talk about Windows game mode. Windows game mode for me didn't really affect my FPS at all. Even if I have it on or off, you can just test it by going into game and then turning it off alt tabbing, turning it off, on, and seeing which you have more FPS. For me, if I have it off, I have like pretty much the same FPS as I have it on. It doesn't really change anything for me, but on Reddit people say if you turn it off, the game mode off, then you get more FPS on Windows. This is gonna be some of the more advanced stuff. So first off, what you wanna do is disable full screen optimizations. I think this is a feature even in Windows 11. So what you wanna do is open your task manager on the program you wanna get more FPS in. And then what you wanna do is go to properties, compatibility. And then what you wanna do is change to disable full screen optimizations and change high DPI settings and put high DPI scaling override and put application on that. And that for me gave about 5 FPS more. But it makes alt tabbing a lot slower and a lot more performance inducing on the CPU. For example, it has spikes when I alt tab. So maybe you don't like it because you alt tab a lot. I wouldn't put this if I would alt tab a lot, but I don't alt tab a lot in games, so I can put this on. The next thing people talk a lot about is some sort of power plan on Windows itself. What I would say about this is you don't have to copy anyone else's power plan. What you need to do is what I show on the screen. So you just click any of these blue things and you just click change settings, change advanced power settings, and then what you need to do is go to processor power management. And when you're there, you need to have the minimum and the maximum to setting to 100%. This gives for me the highest performance boost. Anything else in here doesn't really change a lot in my opinion. Anything else doesn't really like do much, doesn't give you more FPS. The only thing that really gives you FPS is having your CPU running at 100 all the time. Now we're going to get to the more advanced stuff, so overclocking and stuff like that. And the only two programs you will need is CPU-Z, that will be in the description. The second program you will need is MSCI Afterburner. We're going to overclock everything a little bit, so your RAM, CPU and GPU. This is going to give you that extra performance boost, maybe like 20% if you're lucky, maybe even more if you're even more lucky, but it's at least gonna give you 10, even with the worst cooler in the planet, it's gonna give you some performance. First off, of the applications I was talking about, you just open CPU-C. And it looks kind of weird, but what you only need to be looking for is core voltage. And core voltage you need to be looking for. For me, it's pumping around like 1.29 and 1.32. That's like my voltage where it's like going around. That's totally normal for my CPU. I have capped it at that. But for your CPU, I would run like a stress test. My favorite stress test is going to leechess.com or org and just doing a couple of moves in the chessboard, and then your CPU will catch a lot of heat and the voltages will go up and down, up and down. What you need to be looking for is the highest voltage your CPU goes to. So for example, before I cap my voltage, my CPU would go all the way up to 1.45. That's my highest that I have ever seen, maybe closer to even 1.5. But what you need to be looking for is what the highest was on your CPU. That is important, you need to write that down. Now that you have wrote down the number of voltages you had on your CPU, we're going to move on the overclocking of the GPU. So overclocking your GPU is by far the easiest because you can just do it in Windows with MSCI Afterburner. So what you need to have is MSCI Afterburner open. And what I would do is have a stress test running in the background while you touch these numbers. So the numbers you want to touch is first you want to make a curve under the 900, like way below. You just want to curve this all down. What I would do is just put minus 300 on it and then just drag the 900 up like this. And this is what it should look like for you. This is not gonna crash or anything. It just uses less electricity when it's on the lowest setting and less performance when it's on the lowest setting. So when you idle in your PC, it's not gonna like have any performance on it because you don't need any performance while watching YouTube, for example. And the next thing you wanna do is, this is the actual overclocking part. You wanna have a stress test in the background constantly. Every time you do this, you want to have a stress test. And then you basically can just pull up on the 900. I would always pull up on the 900 first. And just see where you can get it without crashing. If it crashes, just close the stress test and put the number a little bit lower. So this is how it's supposed to look like. You can get all the way up to like plus 200, even on shittier graphics cards. But I would aim for like 150, that's totally fine. Then the next thing I would drag is like 1100 voltage. That's the next thing I would track. And I would track it up like a little bit. I would track it maybe to plus 50, plus 100. That's extra performance for you. And if it doesn't crash on the stress test while you have it, you constantly want to have the stress test while you pull any of these numbers. As long as the stress test doesn't crash, everything is fine. You just constantly want to have the stress test in the background running so you know you're not going to crash in a real situation. Now, when you have found the perfect numbers for yourself, what you want to do is you want to save those numbers in MSCI Afterburner and have MSCI Afterburner launch itself every time you launch your PC. That's going to give you extra performance on things that are taxing for the graphics card. And also you can boost your fan speed here. It's totally fine to boost your fan speed. If you don't, for example, I have them running at 100 almost every time it gets above 60 because I don't really care about noise that much. Now that we have overclocked the GPU, it's time to overclock the CPU and the RAM. So what you want to do is close down your PC or just click restart. And what you want to do is open the BIOS of your computer. And there should be, on most RAMs, there should be this thing called XMP or something similar. If you click it, it will just apply the best or the default settings basically to your RAM. Some RAMs are way too much boosted on their default settings, so they might crash or something. But most RAMs are totally fine to put your XMP on. Like older RAMs especially, you can even overclock them. But you should just have XMP always on when you build a new PC, when you have a PC. If you have never done this, you should at least have XMP on. If you're not going to do the GPU overclock, the CPU overclock, you should at least have your RAM XMP on. Next, in the BIOS, this is the semi-dangerous part. This is the part where you need to remember the number of voltage you wrote down. And this is the part where you need to know your CPU's boosted clock. So for example, I have an i7 8700K and my boost clock, the maximum boost clock on default is 4.7 gigahertz. Now we want to target 4.7 gigahertz and we want to just test at what voltage would it be running good. I would test your max voltage. For example, for me was 1.4 was my max voltage that I hit constantly. I would test 1.3, that's totally safe because it has hit higher numbers even in Windows itself without overclocking. So I would put 1.7 gigahertz with 1.3 voltage for my CPU. For your it might be totally different. And what I would do is log into Windows and test it. If it crashes, maybe apply more voltage and check your temperatures as well. You can check the temperatures easiest in MSCI Afterburner on this big window. Scroll all the way down and you will see your CPU temperatures. Again, if you want to test a taxing test on your CPU, I would just open chess and do a little bit of analysis on chess, and that's super taxing on your computer or your CPU specifically. Now that you have done everything, it probably took you 30 minutes, maybe even more, maybe an hour if you're super slow and maybe you crashed a bunch of times. If you ever cannot log into Windows because you do some dumb numbers, dumb settings, dumb stuff, if you do anything like that, don't worry. Every single motherboard has a BIOS reset switch that is manual. All you need to do is just look at your motherboard, know what serial number it is, manufacturer, and you will be able to reset it. Even if you do the most dumbest things in BIOS, you just put like way too much voltage, way too much stuff. you will be able to reset it afterwards manually. Now that's it. I would say just test whatever. You will definitely have better FPS. Just check that the temperatures don't go above 85 Celsius. I don't know what the Fahrenheit is, but I will just write it down on the screen. Above that, I wouldn't go on your peaks. That's like your peaks. If your peaks are way above that, I would say 90 peak is still pretty much fine. Your CPU life will go down, your GPU life will go down if you constantly play at those temperatures and they're constantly peaking at 90. But anything above 90 is like deadly. You shouldn't have it anywhere near even touching there. But that's pretty much it. This will definitely give you the best performance if you just watch the whole video. Everything in here, if you have done nothing, you will definitely have 40% more performance. If you have done nothing on your game, on your anything, you will have 40% more performance, even on the shittiest machines. So that's pretty much it. You don't need anything else. Just go do it. Tell me what performances you got before, after. Was it good? Did you crash? If you crashed, you can still get it back. It's fine, as long as you didn't put like super high voltages where you can't get back anyway. So that's it. Go do it. Go enjoy peak performance.